Live here with another episode of In Space. I am your host, as always, Chris Connor. I got a special guest here who, thanks to Twitter, I did not think this would even be possible at one point when Twitter decided to die.
Yeah. No, honestly, what a perfect timing to try to do a podcast, because as soon as you wanted to send the DM to send the Zoom link, Twitter crashes on you. That's just unfair. Unfair, man.
All right, well, if you guys are unfamiliar, man, I'm live here with Es Baraheni. He NBA reporter from SDPN Sports. Really good Twitter follow. I know formerly you did work with The Score, Raptors Republic, TSN, and you also got a podcast, the Objective Basketball Podcast, and the No Good Pod. So if y'all get a chance, please go and follow him. It's always good. And specifically for what we're about to get into, Pelicans are in a situation. Ironically, the Zion news dropped today that he won't be. He'll be reevaluated after the All-Star break, and we'll see where that leads this team. But the main purpose, regardless of whether of Zion's return, was talking like the Pelicans needed and were interested in making a lot of different moves, and there have been several names linked to some that you have talked about in depth.
Yeah.
But one of the things I actually want to start with is I'm big on learning more about players than I think I know, right? I don't watch every single Raptors game. I don't watch every single Hawks game. The only games I watch consistently night in and night out that I can attest to are the Pelicans. So let's get into some of the news or some of the chatter that's been out in about the Raptors. And
I know who you're gonna ask about.
I know
who you're about to ask about, man.
But where are the Raptors? Period. Now, because the Pelicans have been linked to multiple players, right?
Yeah. I feel you. I think if you were to ask me a week ago, the Raptors would be in a situation where they're about to sell, and they would probably be looking at one of Fred VanVleet or Gary Trent Jr. just because they're free agents this summer, on top of potentially OG Anunoby because of the reasons that have been reported, right? Whether it be his dissatisfaction or him wanting a bigger role, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are the three guys primarily that you would be looking at. But five days ago and today is a little bit of a different story, because I think the Kyrie situation put a wrench in things. I think it made it so. Yeah, I think whether it's valid or not, I think it's made it so that a lot of teams believe they can get Kevin Durant. And the Raptors, like the Pelicans, are probably one of those teams that thinks they have a shot at Kevin Durant. So now they're not as willing to be trigger happy on trades versus being willing to be trigger happy on trades. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's just a reluctance there for them to do something now. And that probably applies to a lot of the league. That probably applies to a lot of the league. But that's probably where they're at right now. They're trying to battle that line of like, okay, do we wait for another guy or do we not? And do we, kind of stick with whatever plan we probably had here of shaking things up?
So, I mean, the players that have been, and there have been quite a few, but you've heard Pascal Siakam's name mentioned, right? You've heard Fred VanVleet's name mentioned, and the two that I've heard the most, and that may be because as a watcher and a fan of the Pelicans, the two that I think would help them, and I mean various other teams, the most, all things considered, are OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. So from afar, people look at the Raptors, maybe those that aren't lucky enough to watch them night in and night out, and they wonder, okay, you have all of these talented players, right? All of these guys that are individuals that are worth this kind of draft capital, this kind of return. Why are they struggling?
Right.
Kind of educate me on that.
I think it's less about the individual players, but the sum of their parts. I think when it comes to them playing collectively, it's proven that there's a bit of redundancy on the roster. Guys are fighting for the same money if you think about who's a free agent in the coming years. And two, guys are also fighting for the same touches. And there's no necessary hierarchy of like who is the top dog. So every single night, it could be a different person. Some nights that ends up being OG. Some nights that ends up being Gary. Most nights it's Pascal and Freddie. And Scotty obviously is in there as well as another guy to deal with. If it was just those four and not Scotty, and this is not to say Scotty, but Scotty is kind of throwing a wrench in things because of how good he is, where it's like, okay, we don't have enough touches for all five of these guys who absolutely need or want the ball in their hands. So instead of it being like, yo, why does this not work? What is wrong with this team? I think it's about the fact that these players are not players that just match together consistently. There's a little bit of redundancy. And if you were to take away one of those players, like an OG, like a Fred, like a Gary, this light keeps turning off, like a Gary, there's a shot that maybe now that system works. And if you get a little bit more depth, guys who don't need touches, guys who don't need the ball in their hands, if you get guys like that, then maybe the system will work a little bit better. But right now, it's just everybody is hungry for touches. That's what it is. And they believe they deserve those touches. So that's why the team is underperforming compared to what you kind of see on the court and what the guys can be individually.
Yeah, and you know what? It kind of, it's difficult from my perspective because I've even dating back to when Kawhi was a Raptor, I was a big fan of OG Anunoby, right? And then when Kawhi left, right, I thought he was going to make a leap, and I think he actually did. I think he was on the way to being an all-star kind of guy, kind of talent. I think the opportunity was going to be there, right?
I think, look, from a Raptors perspective, a lot of people expected that. Like you're not alone in thinking that way. There's a lot of fans, there's a lot of media people who expected OG at some point to get to that spot. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, that year, he gets hurt, which I really think kind of is where this takes a completely different direction. He gets hurt. The Raptors end up in a situation. A bunch of other things happen. They end up in a situation. They get Scotty, and then you already had Van Vliet there. You already I think that was the year. I'm forgetting his name. The backup big who ended up playing well now, who maybe fell out of Nick Nurse's favor in the rotation, but and we already know the Raptors do well at developing talent. Siakam has been fantastic as well. It gets to a point to where now, well, maybe Scotty's the future. And instead of maybe the focus being, or the emphasis being on OG, him maybe being a number 2 option, or, the emphasis being in getting him the basketball more. Now he's down to 3rd or 4th, depending on the night.
Yeah. Hey, he's last among those guys that you mentioned. He's last in usage. Dead last. So yeah, it seems like he's gotten the short end of the stick. And I don't blame him for wanting to try more because, to your point, and I feel like you were trying to allude to it earlier, but the whole, who is this guy actually? And I appreciate the fact that you asked, that's your approach to things, because, hey, we can't watch all 30 teams. I'm an NBA reporter. I try to keep up with everybody, but yeah, you sometimes fall behind on some of the players. I think with OG, in terms of what you think that guy is as a player, I think he's a guy who, when you watch on a game-to-game basis, will not have one drop off defensively. The man is legitimately one of the best, if not the best, wing defender in the NBA. And a lot of people draw that Kawhi comparison because of that, because he has the tools to be able to guard 1 to 5. I think that's what really draws his attention. OG is 250 pounds. He's a big dude. And that actually ends up helping him guard bigger guys, guard your Jokic's, guard your the Raptors' main guy who guards Jokic ends up being Anunoby. The guy who guards Giannis ends up being OG. The guy who guards Donovan Mitchell ends up being OG. Those 3 players have completely different ways to play basketball. They play completely different positions, but OG is consistently the assignment on them. That versatility is what I think personally draws the attention of the Pelicans the most, because y'all love that switch heavy scheme. So that's all. Yeah, I guess that you go ahead.
So let me ask you this, because I mean, this won't be like an OG Anunoby show, right?
I know.
He's the prize to me, like out of like the realistic prize. Everybody wants, there's anybody that has anything close to offer should be calling the Nets to see if Kevin Durant is available. Sure, of course, and it makes 100% sense. But it feels like the more gettable option, and especially for winning teams, that someone who isn't going to require, whether it's up to what OG wants as an individual right now, a ton of usage, is OG. My question is, and we will get to Gary Trent, is what do you think that's worth, and what's the actual truth about what the Raptors genuinely want?
I think the Raptors want a young guy back, and like a young guy of substance. You see the question here, La Pena Donola. Yes, Dyson Daniels is the guy that most people are targeting when it comes to a trade for OG Anunoby, because they look at him in a similar vein, in the sense that, like, you watch him defensively, you see, I don't want to say you see some of the OG stuff, but like he has that versatility to him where he can switch, he can guard multiple positions. He's out here closing out, and then he's also guarding your guard. Like, he's doing all the things that you can see OG doing within the scheme. And also on top of that, he's an excellent playmaker. He's this guy who's this big guard, right? I think Dyson is a guy the Raptors would absolutely be like interested in. From what I know, they were interested in the draft. They were reported in looking at Dyson Daniels for the draft and moving up. And the guy they were planning to use was the guy we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
So it just I think there's some sort of a connection there. It just depends on the level of the interest with the Pelicans, to be honest with you, and what their, I guess, reluctance or not reluctance is to be able to include Dyson, or maybe say, hey, like, well, we want to give up another player instead, another young guy. And the young guys, and I'm curious to see, because I'd love to hear what your opinion is on this. Between Dyson, Trey, and Herb, what is your ranking of willingness to move?
Man, that's
because I'm curious.
Like what I think, or my personal ranking?
Your personal ranking.
My personal ranking of willing to move in an OG deal. Would be Herb, Dyson, Trey.
Okay, so Trey is last. Damn.
Trey would be last.
I had to try.
Trey would be last. I mean, because you need, like, and I mean, we can talk like Trey as an individual talent is one thing. Some of the improvements he's made this year, still has some strides to take defensively. You want to see, he has to get stronger. I mean, he's still developing in a lot of areas.
For sure.
But that shooting with that athleticism, homegrown, small market on a rookie deal, like
showing off a little bit of
with
shot
Zion, Brandon, you need. I think you have to keep that, for as long as you can, realistically. But I'll tell you this. I mean, I've heard more people that would know close to the Pelicans say that Dyson is untouchable. Maybe in a sense more than Trey, which is interesting to me.
Wow, that is interesting. That's that's the first I've heard of that, but like that, if that's true, I think the Raptors would be equally interested in Trey. I think like all three of those guys kind of fit the bill of what the Raptors look for, right? Size, athleticism, strength, being able to guard multiple positions. I think that's something that's very clear that they're looking for. So to your question about what they would want back for Anunoby, it's a guy who can replicate some of the stuff that he does defensively, which in my opinion, like maybe at some point all three of those guys can do. I think offensively be able to have some kind of potential and upside as well. So I think they prioritize young guys more than picks, to be honest with you, if they're going for an OG trade. I don't think it's like, I know we've seen the reports of 3 picks, 2 picks, 3 picks, 2 picks, right? But I don't think they're looking at picks as actual draft picks. I think they're looking at it as like guys who are young guys plus picks, which amounts to 3 picks. So it's like we get 2 prospects and 1 pick. All right, cool. That's 3 picks. We get 1 prospect and 2 picks. That's still 3 picks. You know what I mean?
Okay, because that's where things get lost, right? Because I think some of the things that have been reported, and this, I mean, we know so much. Nothing really gets real until today, right? I mean, typically, I mean that's just how it goes. There's a bunch of posturing and games through the media, and we understand that 100%. But I think that's the disconnect with some, in regards to what is realistic. Some may say, "All right, I'll give you Dyson and Herb, but I'll give you a draft pick, but it has to be heavily protected." I think there's been reports of saying, all right, they want 2 young players and maybe 2 picks or 3 picks, whatever the case may be. And some may say, all right, I don't want to give you Dyson in a couple of picks. Yeah, I'm just curious of what the various.
I think, look, I get it. And look, the Raptors, they're going to do their best to get like the most possible, right? So obviously the back and forth between them and the reporting and what goes out there is a little bit of posturing. There is a little bit of like playing that leverage game. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm sure every other team does that as well. But I think the conclusion that I come to most of the times when it comes to what the Raptors want for OG is like a very young, a young prospect that they believe in, plus maybe another prospect that could be interesting, plus a pick.
Okay.
And then the protections on the pick, I think, would be dependent on what they believe in the prospects, right? So It depends what team. But when you come to the Pelicans and like there is that history of them being interested in Dyson, I think they probably have them high on their prospect list, right? So
okay, so let's move forward here because I can talk about the possibility of OG Anunoby, and I got too many photoshops on my phone. Him and the Pelicans, but let's talk Gary Trent Jr., who I've been feeling over the past couple weeks is more of the realistic route, and just makes the most sense based off of what Herb's people, man. The Pelicans fans and faithful. Herb Jones, 2nd round pick on that deal. The way that he's played, we know what he can do defensively, and he's starting to find ways again offensively to affect the game without his jump shot falling. But like people don't want to give that up because it's not like from a value perspective that's hard to find right at that size. So I get that, and the question has been when it comes to OG, well, how much better is that, and is that worth attaching a young player and draft capital to? Gary Trent Jr., I don't think it's clear where he fits immediately. I don't think he's taking anything away from anyone. He's going to be able to score. What he's going to be able to provide, especially through our injuries. It's more so, what do you do with him beyond this year?
Because you got to pay him.
Exactly. Yeah. And what are you willing to pay a guy like that for a team that is going to be talking about being close to the luxury tax and what player is worth going there or being close to that number? Educate me and the fan base a little bit on Gary Trent Jr. for those that don't get a chance to watch every game, Raptor game or even Blazers game in the past.
I think honestly, man, Gary is a certified bucket. He's really young. He's, I think, 24 years old. And the thing that you can rely on with him is the fact that he'll find his rhythm. He goes through these streaks. There's no doubt in my mind. He's like a streaky shooter. He's this off the bench kind of like microwave scorer. But I think he finds his rhythm consistently. And this year, more than anything, I think we learned that he was comfortable coming off the bench just as much as he was starting. And he looked better as a starter because he just got more touches. But when it came to him coming off the bench, he didn't really make any complaints or anything like that. And that actually weighed with the way the Raptors front office looks at him. I am not 100% sold on them moving Gary anymore. I don't think they end up moving him because there's been an interest level there for them to keep him. So I'm not sure. Maybe that is posturing. But if they were to move him, I think he's a guy who can spread the floor for you, who can create his own shot at a very difficult rate. Like he hits tough shots. The only thing I would say is that his defense is not even a quarter of what OG can do on defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like, and I would say with the way you guys play, the scheme that you guys play defensively with the switching, I don't know if that's the greatest scheme for him, although he does play a switch heavy style this year. I mean, it's tough to say for me how he would fit in New Orleans. I think the touches would be there. I think him getting offensively, there's no question about that. But the defensive side of things, I think the difference, to your point earlier about like the difference between Trent and OG and like if it's worth it for your team, I would think it's worth it because it all depends on the team. Like if you were the Indiana Pacers and you were asking me right now, hey, does it make sense for me to go for OG Anunoby? I'd say, I mean, maybe if you see him as a long-term fit, but that's not going to help your team as much as it would help the Pelicans or the Grizzlies for that matter. He is worth more to those teams than he is to another team. So I think for you guys, the main prize should be OG, but you know what I mean? Like I get the realistic aspect of things with Gary, but I don't know if that's a guy that makes 100% sense for you guys to go in and buy depending on price. If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I'm gonna a quick word from my sponsor here, S, and then I'm gonna ask you about possible compensation for Gary Trent, question on Pascal, sure, and then we'll wrap up, okay? All right. Quick word here from my guys at DraftKings Sportsbook. Are you guys ready for the biggest Super Bowl Sunday in sports? DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 57, has all the Super Bowl action you need. New customers can bet just up to $5 and get 200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, all customers can get in on Super Bowl 57 excitement with DraftKings Happy Hour Super Boost. Got to check the app between 6 and 9 p.m. Eastern for updates to see what prop boot will be listed. Be sure you see the link there, the code boot BOOT, and you can instantly bet $5 on Super Bowl 57 and get up to $200 in bonus bets instantly. Code boot. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, crisis counseling and referral services can be accessed by calling 1-800-GAMBLER. You can also text HOPE-NY or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. So S, back to Gary Trent Jr. real quick. There've been reports about first round pick. Maybe there've been reports about maybe a few seconds. What do you think is going to cost to get a guy like Gary Trent if Toronto does decide to move him?
I think a late lotto, like a late first, late lotto, something like that. That would make a lot of sense for me. Probably something this year, like a 2023 first. But then there's this other idea that they can maybe just go for like a prospect plus a couple seconds. So if it was, I don't know, not necessarily a prospect like that, not a Dyson Daniels or a Herb. I don't think he gets you that, but if you kind of have a reclamation project you'd be interested in, like Cam Reddish in 2 seconds type of thing, or you know what I mean, something along the lines of that. I'm not sure what Gary's value is, to be honest with you, because there's been less conversation about him than there is about an OG or a Fred or a Pascal even. I think Gary's value depends on how much you value what he does shooting wise, what he does, and if you believe it sticks. Like if you think that what he is right now is a guy that will end up being one of the best shooters in the NBA, because that's what he has to do in order to be successful in the league. Like, yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends on what you believe in him. And I will say to Gary's the Gary point, his value is probably skewed a little bit because it's hard to dictate with the streaky shooting.
Yeah,
where exactly teams sit on him. So I'm not sure.
Okay, and that's totally respectable. Quick, is there any chance that we see a Pascal Siakam move? Is that something that we could possibly see? Maybe not necessarily to the Pelicans, but at all, anywhere.
It would be hard for me to see a team trading for Pascal and the Raptors trading in midseason. I think there's a pretty good chance that they wait until the summer to assess that situation, because in the summer he'll only have one more year left on his deal. And then if he makes all NBA this year, he might be super max eligible. So that changes some things for the Raptors. I don't know if that changes too much, but I think Siakam is happy here. I think it takes a Godfather type offer for them to say yes. Like if we're going back to the let's compare it to the OG package that we talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd have to include 2 of Dyson, Herb, and Trey, plus multiple first round picks instead of just the 1 pick. And then now you're in the ballpark of a Pascal Siakam. So I think that's how much that's a tough pill to swallow for you. I understand that's tough, but that's what the offers would be. Like that's the type of stuff that would make them second guess and be like, oh, I mean, maybe we will. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, man. If what you're saying about what it would take to acquire OG Anunoby is what's actual cost, if that's what it comes down to,
yeah.
Whew, I do not want to hear reports. If a deal isn't done, I do not want to hear reports that's what it costs. But that's just me. That's just me. I'm a fan of OG, and even if it's not, I can't promise you that. I'm not saying that OG's the finishing pieces on a for a championship team when it comes to for this Pelicans team. We still have only seen 10 games of the 3 best players playing together. Yeah. I'm a believer in the talent, and I think you might not have another opportunity to acquire a dude like that, because once he hits free agency, he's gonna get a bag, and he's gonna have a lot of bidders.
Yeah. So I mean, you're essentially trading for the right to re-sign him right now.
Basically,
right. That's the only really. I mean, yeah, I get it. He's young and he can fit into your core, but at the same time, it's someone you got to believe in for the next 5+ years. So.
Okay, so my we'll wrap up with this.
Sure.
OG Anunoby, I want you to give me the percentage of, in your opinion, based off what you believe, of him being traded, and then I want the percentage of him being traded to the Pelicans. Mm-hmm. We'll start with OG.
All right. Well, I'll say I think he's 100% going to get traded at some point. The deadline, I would drop that down to 50%.
Okay.
The Pelicans, I would drop that down to about probably like 25%, maybe 30%, maybe 30%.
Okay.
But I think they're based on what has been reported, based on what we've seen regarding OG and how he wants to expand his role somewhere else, I think there is a chance that they end up not even a chance. I think there's no doubt that they would end up moving him in the summer. But whether this deadline is the exact moment they end up trading him, I'd give it like a 50% chance. And then if it goes to the Pelicans, yeah, like 30%.
Okay. And let's do the same for Gary Trent Jr. Chances he's traded overall, and then the percentage of that trade sending him to the Pelicans.
I would say it is a 50-50 shot that he gets traded. And I would say there's probably a 5 to 10% chance he gets traded to the Pelicans.
Man,
it's a low chance. It's a lower chance. It's a lower chance that he gets traded to the Pelicans for sure.
I'm anticipating whenever Twitter starts to work again, my DMs being on fire, because I get so many Gary Trent Jr. Believe it or not, man, I think more Pelicans fans are interested in Gary Trent Jr. than OG Anunoby.
Well, I get it from like a cost perspective. Yeah. You know what I mean? I get it from that perspective because it's obviously less to acquire him. You can still get the shooting. He's probably a better shooter than OG Anunoby. He is a better shooter than OG Anunoby. And like, yeah, I get it. But the defensive difference is large. It's massive. And I don't know how a backcourt of CJ and him gets a lot of stops. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, it'd have to be a 6-man kind of role. Yeah. I think, if you bring him in with, sometimes I think that would be refreshing to the team, but you just, if you look at what you hope them to be when they are healthy and some of the flashes that you've seen, you'd rather add another person that can impact your team defensively with a little bit of shooting. That's how I look at it. But with this team, you just never know because someone's always hurt, man. So I get it.
Yeah.
Guys, I really appreciate it. Everybody who pulled up, please tap in with S. You got to follow him on Twitter at just Es Baraheni. We gotta do this again, and hopefully, we'll interact on Twitter if a trade happens at all, or if it is a Raptors trade. Also, guys, this podcast is also sponsored by Birdsall Law Firm, the official injury lawyers of Boo Crew Media, located at 918 Portage Street by the Superdome. Give them a call at 504-523-5413. If you or someone you know have been involved in an accident, be sure to mention that we sent you. Hopefully we go back to a working Twitter website.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. We need it. I mean, look, I don't know how many hours we got left until the trade deadline, but it's less than 24, and I need that to work tomorrow morning. At the very least, I need Twitter to be back up tomorrow morning. I will say to the Pelicans people who are listening, I appreciate you guys. Y'all, the team you guys have had, the first 20 or so games, maybe even more, that I watched of the Pelicans, you guys were my favorite watch of the entire NBA. Man, it was so much fun to watch Zion just absolutely dominate. Just dominate. The game that he had against the Raptors, I was like, man, this is like LeBron level dominance. The Raptors had not been dominated like that since LeBronto. Like, that's how it felt.
That was like the start. That was like the start of his run, like of that period, like leading to the runs, and then the Timberwolves game. But the Raptors game to me was the start.
Man, I can't wait until he gets back. I'm excited to see how it works with Ingram and CJ and whatnot. And yeah, if you guys end up making any moves, that will be cool to watch too. But you guys seriously have been like a joy to watch, man. That's why I need Dyson. I need Dyson, bro.
Anyway. And you know what? I'd be more than happy if I was in power to make that move and take OG Anunoby off your hands. But there's a reason why they don't pay me to do that. So, for S, for me, Boo Crew, In Space, appreciate y'all. We out of here.
Appreciate it.